Hi guys, fellow educators and school leaders. Welcome back to Tomo Club podcast series. I'm Avinash, co-founder of Tomo Club, and today we are discussing a very important topic of how strong school climate can lead to better test scores, attendance, and teacher retention. And I'm very excited to welcome Dr. Teresa Hill. She's a superintendent of South Holland School District, and she has held multiple leadership roles from superintendent to assistant superintendent, principal, and she's also the author of a book called Instructional Leaders Guide to Closing Achievement Gaps. So, welcome, Dr. Teresa, and congratulations for your book.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
Perfect. So, before we start, I would love to know if you would like to share a little bit about your journey, from your lens, and maybe tell us a little bit about your book as well.
Absolutely. Well, I actually started out in the same community that I now am a school leader in. So, in the south suburbs of Chicago, in very similar schools, actually, the neighboring school district to the one where I serve right now. I ended up going into elementary education, and I was actually not encouraged to go into education because I had high test scores and high grades in high school. And I was told, oh, well, you could be a doctor or an engineer or those types of things. And I was actually discouraged from going into elementary education, but that had been my love from being a young teenager. So I was dedicated to going into elementary ed. And so I went and got my degree. And then I started out actually teaching kindergarten, which I tell people often, in a quote unquote urban school district in Peoria, Illinois, which is in central Illinois. One of our smaller cities. And I had 31 kindergartners in full day kindergarten by myself. So that was my start. But I found, as I tell people, that I'm very much a control freak. Not necessarily that I need to control others, but I was not okay with the idea that I did all of the work that I did and had the dedication that I had with my kindergartners for 1 year, and then I had to let them go, and I had no influence on what happened to them after that. So that was what pushed me to go into administration, where I felt like I could have an impact on kids throughout their time. From there, I was able to start a job as an assistant principal, which I did for 2 years in two different schools in the same district. And then I became a principal of an elementary school, a K-5 elementary school, before moving into the district office administration, where I worked with curriculum and instruction. So that was a great time down in central Illinois. I spent about 10 years there. And I felt like it was a great district. We had a lot of diversity, but we also had some of the challenges. We had neighborhood schools. We had an achievement gap district wide and across the different schools, because some schools were high income, some schools were low income. And so I got some great experiences there. And then I ended up coming back to the Chicagoland area, where now I've been superintendent in South Holland for 13 years. So I have really had a lot of opportunity to really build in South Holland since I've been there. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Can you check your mute?
Oh, damn. Pause? Damn. So, thank you so much, Dr. Teresa. I think that was very impressive.
Thank you very
Hello?
much. Yes. Okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
I lost you for a minute
And I would
there.
love to know about your book as well. Like, how was it?
Oh, absolutely. Um, Well, my career really has been focused on this idea of the achievement gap because of the schools where I have served. That issue has always been of concern to me. That we have some students and some groups of students that, simply aren't getting the outcomes that we would like to see. And to me, that means that there are things that we can and should change about what we do in schools to close those gaps. And so I have done much of my research, my dissertation research was focused on the achievement gap.
Recording in progress.
And so during my time in school district 151 in South Holland and in previous school districts, I've devoted a lot of focus on how do we close or eliminate those achievement gaps. And so this book really came about of trying to pull together some of the things that we know that schools can do within our sphere of influence to impact the achievement gap. There's a lot of things that we don't really have influence over. We can't determine, what happens in a child's home life or what happens before they enter school. But we have a lot of power to impact what happens
Yeah.
when children are within our walls. And so this book really focuses on those key areas. How do we teach literacy and the use of language? How do we provide experiences and exposure to our children, regardless of what their background is? How do we give kids opportunities and teach them to consolidate their knowledge and to really think about the experiences that they've had? What do we do to build in practice into our schools and make sure that if students are missing certain skills that we catch up with those? And then how do we use assessment in a meaningful way so that it's not just what we do for school accountability, but it can actually help us improve the instruction we provide to children. So that's really what the book focuses on. It's how do we pull together all of the things that we can do in schools in reality in our sphere of influence that can make a difference for those achievement gaps and improve outcomes overall for our kids.
No, absolutely. I think I love that five elements of how education has to be more equitable and not just for few. So, Dr. Teresa, I think I would love to shift to a Zoom link because this is really not exciting because so much lag is happening. So, I have emailed you a Zoom link. Is it possible for you to
Okay,
join there? I'm so sorry for this.
no problem, not at all.
So,
So
there's a
let
Zoom link in
me,
the email that I've sent you.
okay, I
Thank
see
you so
it.
much for
So
understanding.
I'm going to leave
Yeah.
here and join the Zoom link right now.
Oh my God, this is so much better.
Yes,
So, can you hear me loud and clear now?
I can.
Perfect, perfect. Now, so can I. So, yeah, I think I'll use that part of the video and club it together. But I think impressive. I think that book was very helpful for me to understand various aspects of it. But like, how do you define school climate in the first place? I want to know the definition as per your understanding.
Yes. Um, well, I define school climate as quite honestly the feeling that you have when you come in and you exist in a school space. And so I think sometimes um, different groups are left out of what school climate means.
Mhm.
So we assume that school climate is about what the students experience only or what the teachers experience only, when really school climate is about what does everyone feel? What are we immersed in when we walk into a school or when we exist in a school? So that includes the students, that includes the teachers, that includes the parents when they are there, that includes the administrators. Um, what is the feeling we get? How welcome do we feel? How much do we feel like we belong there? How much do we feel that our needs are important or that our desires are being heard? So it really is a global thing. And I think sometimes it gets distilled down to, are the classrooms quiet or are there, is there recognition or is student work put on the board? When it's really much more about how do we interact with one another and how do each of us feel about being within that space.
No, absolutely. I agree with you 100% because we also work a lot in social emotional learning space and life skill space. And I always tend to explain to a lot of school leaders that how a school climate can impact all the metrics that they have, you know, but it's difficult to establish that connection because as you said, people look at school climate from a disciplinary or from a behavior issue point of view and not from a overall. So how were you able to create that connection or how do you explain that connection?
Right. Well, I think the first thing that we try to do is we try to make sure that everybody in the organization as a whole, the whole district, but also then each of the schools understands both our expectations and our desires for what school will be for our students and for our staff. And so we really start out with, um, those certain expectations of what is the importance of our children, first of all, helping people to understand that when we are in these roles, we are working with somebody's child. And
Yeah.
so we want to be thinking about what would we want for our child in a space where they're going to spend their entire day? What are the things that will help build a child up for their future? And how do we make that a part of what we do? Um, it's important to sometimes step back a little bit because part of our role is to, create these structures and make rules and make schedules and things like that. But it's important that as we try to put those things together, that at times we step back and say, okay, how would this look to me if I was the kindergartner or the second grader or the eighth grader? How would this feel? Is this really conducive to that child's learning? We know we have to do things that will work for a whole group, but we also want to pay attention to what does it mean for individual children. And so one of the things that we will try to do on occasion is we will, use our data and look at individual children. So, maybe a child that is struggling more than we would like, or a child that is doing particularly well. And we will pick out that child and then we will have somebody, whether it's one of their building administrators or even a district administrator, shadow that child for a day
Mhm.
and see what do they really experience. What is it really like,
Yeah.
to be in our schools? And sometimes you just see things that you don't necessarily see when you are busy, actually doing the teaching or actually doing the counseling or things like that. you know Everything from, oh, wow, this child had 10 interruptions,
Mhm.
you know, during their reading block, or, this child sits in a chair that happens to be in that corner of the room that's perpetually cold. I mean, it can be all sorts of little things that we don't necessarily notice or plan for, but it impacts different individual children. And so from time to time, we have to actually pull back a little bit and look at how our decisions impact kids, because we can make decisions that are the right decision, but that are not right for some children.
Yeah. No, I can't agree more with you. Like I have a 1-year-old child right now. So I read this beautiful piece somewhere that when you play with a child, play while sitting on the ground at the same level, and you'll see a different world. And the room that you are thinking is chaotic or is messed up, you'll find it's not anymore. So again, I
Hmm.
get that immediately that I started to enjoy more since I've started to sit down with my child and play, because I see the world from his perspective now more, which is exactly what
Hmm.
shadowing I think works the best. Um, but I still want to understand a little bit deeper. How do you measure, like quantitatively, not qualitatively, but more with metrics? How do you measure school climate and relate it and correlate it with attendance or grades or teacher retention? Do you do any kind of math there as a superintendent?
Um, well, we do. We have a couple of things that we do, and some of it in our state. There is a survey that our students and our parents are given. Students, parents, and staff are given throughout the state, that is designed get some of that feedback about some of those things. For example, how much do teachers feel like they really collaborate?
Mm-hmm.
How much do teachers and administrators trust one another? How much do parents trust teachers? And how comfortable do teachers feel really communicating with parents? How do the students feel about what they're experiencing, what level of challenge they receive, but also the extent to which they know or believe that somebody is there that cares about them or that will help them. And so that provides us some data based on how people feel and what they perceive, that we are able to kind of use every year, looking at each of our schools and different grade levels and all of that kind of thing. That is one thing that we use. And then we really tie attendance, um, and things like involvement and participation. We tie those all together to our assessment of our school climate. So we believe that the attendance levels directly reflects the school climate, and from our perspective, it also directly reflects how much students believe that they belong in the school, and how much they feel that they are an important part of what goes on in schools. So we actually tie those two together constantly. We view those as, outside of course, those situations where there's, some extenuating circumstance going on, some illness or hospitalization or things like that. But the day-to-day regular school attendance, what we have seen is that those students that are more involved, that feel like they are a part of something during the school day, after the school day, etc., those students try not to miss school. Those are the students whose parents call us to say, my child really wants to be there today, but I have a doctor's appointment or whatever. Can I bring them afterward?
Yeah.
And those things, I think, really make a huge difference. So we really tie those things together directly. You know, like I said, we maintain those measurements from the surveys and our measurement of daily attendance and then chronic absenteeism and all of those things. But we really view those as things that go together. We don't separate them in our thinking and in our discussion. And like I said, what we have seen is that when we are able to engage every child or close to every child in something special that they believe that they are a part of, that makes them want to be there to the point where they will nag their own parents about getting there.
And that's so beautiful. I'm so happy that you're doing it because it's not common what you just said. And so, yeah, I think I can't be happier because when you're putting these numbers together, it just gives more motivation to what you're exactly doing. And so, what are the current challenges? Like you have set up this system in place. So, what are the challenges you are currently facing as a district leader? And it can be anything, not
Um,
full climate, it can be overall as well.
right. I think you know, I think our challenge really is always the same. Um, I feel like the needs are unlimited and the resources are limited.
Yeah.
So, making sure that we are constantly planning to meet student needs is always our challenge, and making sure that we have the ability and the funds to do that. For us, we have worked very hard to make sure that we are constantly expanding our services, giving our students great experiences and opportunities that, quite honestly, are beyond what students in a district that serves primarily low income students, um, you know, usually experience. And so that has been a really good thing. But sometimes it's also a heavy lift because
Yeah.
as we plan, um, to me, the worst thing in the world would be to build all of this up and get kids and families used to that this is what we do, this is what our kids, need and deserve, and then have to take that away. And so constantly thinking about the planning of, okay, what funding are we receiving? How are we receiving that funding? How are we allocating things? How are we making sure that we can continue to do these great things even when, pandemic grants go away? Some of our other grants are under threat right now, in our area and in our nation. So thinking about how do we plan to continue to meet the ever-growing needs of our students at a level that we believe they deserve. We don't believe that they should receive less because they're considered to be low income. And so, how do we continue that even when there are times when, the budget is leaner than it was last year,
Yeah.
or, when we're trying to figure out how do we fit in the time to do all of these things. So, I think that is always our ongoing challenge, and we're always looking to um, continue to move forward. I always tell my administrative team, our goal is to move forward. We never want to move backward. So if something was, at a level 8 last year, we
Hmm.
want to be at a level 9 this year.
Yeah.
We don't want to go back to a level 5 for any reason. And so that's the constant push that we have.
No, I agree. I think budget issues is something which is very the top of the list of any school leader right now. And I think we have something beautiful happening right now in terms of AI in general, whether there's teachers' potential, creativity, speed, and that to free tools. So I think we'll discuss that later. But I think the budget constraints can be right now augmented with free AI tools at massive scale.
Hmm.
And I think there's something amazing happening. But now I want to like dissect the school climate aspect towards the teacher, because I always believe very internally that like teachers' mood impact student mood, which impacts school climate. So it all boils down to those teachers of how are they doing. So in your opinion, how does like school climate is like cultural versus structural? You know, if you want to explain that.
Yeah, so it is interesting. There are, what I think what sometimes people don't understand about education, working in schools, being a teacher or an administrator, or both together, is that um, those individuals make 1,000 decisions a day.
Yeah,
And every one of those decisions, big or small, impacts what goes on in the school, how the school feels, but also how they feel and how they move within that environment.
right.
Um, and so, really thinking about that, the other thing that we believe it's important to recognize is that just as we plan for our students and we think about their needs, those of us in leadership have the responsibility to plan for our teachers and our staff members and think about their needs as well.
Yeah.
Because if they are not well,
Hmm.
our children are not going to be well. And so really just paying attention to the fact that schools are a unique work environment in which teachers spend most of their time with the other students, but they pour their life into the school, so they need as adults um, to be able to interact well with their colleagues. They need to have somebody that is their friend at school, because it's a huge part of how they spend their time. I mean, everybody needs a work friend,
Yeah.
hopefully at least one. But for teachers, I think it's even more so, because the stresses of being in schools are kind of unique, and it is helpful to have somebody else that directly understands what you're going through.
Right.
And so we try to build and encourage those friendships, as well as to both provide time for and build up that sense of collaboration. So, every group of teachers is a teacher team that is designed to really work together. And then we as leaders also have to pay attention to who do we bring in to put on particular teams, and how do we bring those teams together to make sure that they feel the support from one another, and that they have those connections that make it easier to get through a day, or to have somebody to pat you on the back and say it's okay, we're going to make it, and all of those kinds of things.
No, I so much agree with that. And also, I think a lot of teachers' workload, you know, burnout is a big issue. So let's say if something can be done on those lines, they will have more time to do what they love, that is teaching and instructing and talking to their peers. So I think, yeah, I think that's a very important field to address to actually impact school climate, because they become the nodes of whatever trickles down, right? So
Absolutely.
Dr. Hill, like I would also like to know, like, as in like, what are your right now priorities? Because there's so many things happening right now. Like, for example, students are using AI tools. Students are using AI for companionship and therapy and cheating for assignments. And some people are doing it for good, some are doing it for bad. And those things again impact school climate. So, how do you see AI impacting school climate? And how are you addressing it?
Yes, so I think the key thing for AI for all schools and us in particular is um, to make sure to think about it. And what I mean by that is um, there can be a tendency to either go the route of, okay, I'm going to pretend that that's not happening,
Yeah.
keep doing things exactly the way I am, or I'm just gonna let it be a free for all and whatever happens happens,
Mm.
and to not really put thought behind, okay, what does this mean for us, in schools? How can we use it, to allow our teachers and our administrators to focus even more on what we need, which is that human interaction and that follow through and that sense of belongingness and the building of climate. Um, and also, how do we really think about and pay attention to what is it that our children need as it relates to AI?
Yeah.
Now, we know we're in elementary school, so we know that by the time our children are graduating from high school, AI is going to be on a completely different level
Right.
than it even is right now.
Right.
So, it's not just about, oh, let's teach them how to use this particular AI tool. It's really about how do we help them understand how to interact, with, all of these various different tools, how to grow and change as, more technology becomes available, and also how to use their knowledge and their creativity to build upon what they're able to do with AI. And so that really is what we believe is kind of our challenge, our next steps is how do we help our teachers and our staff to really start thinking about and exploring what's possible. And then how do we really start thinking about, okay, what are the things that we need our students to learn in interacting
Yeah.
with the technology? Like I said, knowing that where it will be by the time, they're going to college or entering careers is going to be very different, but can we give them the foundation necessary so that they can grow with the technology and so that they won't be the ones sitting back like, afraid of it, or, can't get a job because all they're prepared to do is tasks that the AI could do for them.
Yeah.
But really bringing them into the idea of, okay, how do we use this? How do we grow with this? I mean, I talked about all of the different decisions that staff members make, but the different menial tasks that staff members and schools and administrators have to do, you know, writing that letter 15 different times, which is essentially the same letter, but we're redoing it, or, even little things like that, all the way up to really starting to think about, okay, if I've got this unique challenge or this child has, this particular learning need, how can I use this tool to help provide that,
Yeah.
while also meeting the needs of all of the other children in the classroom? And really, we and I think most schools are really just at the beginning of really starting that kind of thinking about AI. But I think it's just important that we do that kind of thinking as opposed to, like I said, pretending it doesn't exist or just kind of doing a free for all. Um, Honestly, I'm not that concerned about the cheating aspects.
Yeah.
Again, we're at the elementary level. Um, you know, it's really how do we make it so that our staff, our parents, our students are not afraid of it or the implications of it. that we can use it really as a tool, the same way we used to use, the same way we were all like, oh my gosh, this thing called the internet.
Yeah.
How do we build on it? Now nobody's afraid of the internet anymore. We've learned, we've adjusted. How do we do that same thing with AI, knowing that it's also going to grow and we need to be prepared and prepare our students to be able to grow with it?
It's, so why I brought this up, why I'm connecting AI with school climate. So I'm talking to a lot of school teachers, and one thing that they are telling me back and forth is they were not proactive with the rise of social media, and all the repercussions of social media came back to the schools, and something that they had to manage, which they were completely clueless about sometimes,
Hmm.
with the terminology that they use, that's platforms, the new technologies. And they're like, we don't want to play the catch up game again for AI. And at whatever level it is, I want to feel that I'm equipped enough to comment on it, um, to work alongside with it, and to create that adaptability in me and my students, so that, as you rightly said, it becomes that how these teachers are more AI equipped, because a teacher who is more informed end up impacting a lot more on the student success. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's very rightly said by you. And but I like to know, like, the next follow up on this is, like, what are your current priorities as a school leader? Where are you investing your, I know budgeting is definitely the almost top of the list topic, but what are you budgeting for, if I can ask?
Right. So generally, um, we are focusing on kind of the next things that we want to do, the next expansion. Our work in our district, since I've been there, has been how do we expand the exposure that our students have? Obviously, how do we continue to improve student achievement? Um, but also on the path to that? How do we make sure that they get experiences and exposure that goes along with that? How do we make sure that they get to do the extras that help them to see what their possibilities are for the future? So right now we are actually working. We're devoting some funds for some construction. There's some updates. Now, we've been able to update all of our school buildings and classrooms. We have this one particular area that we are updating into a instructional space for fine and performing arts and STEM. And so, as a part of that, we're really building up our programs in those areas, including, and that's one of the areas that we want to build into. We have a we're working on a podcasting class
Nice.
for our middle school students. We have a newscast that is done by our fourth and fifth graders, and we want to build that into a podcasting class for our middle schoolers. We are working on a theater space, but we're also building into it the audio visual, including the use of AI and those types of things. We have a STEM space that will include uh, programming and AI prompt writing, as well as some robotics and things like that. So what we're really trying to do is, even given that, we're always looking at the budget, we're really trying to continue to build what our students are able to have and what they're able to focus on. Um, and we've really expanded what we offer as far as both STEM and fine and performing arts throughout our schools. So that's where we've devoted a lot of our effort to make sure that our students have that real exposure, and that they can see, some of the things that they may be able to do in the future. And actually, nowadays between social media and AI, our young kids can do entire, broadcasts and build things, and they can just go far beyond what used to be possible at that age. And so our priority right now is building out both the time and the curriculum and the space to
Mm.
really be able to build that and make that a part of the experience for every child going through our school district.
No, those are some brilliant directions. I think I love that. So, like everything that we have talked about today, from building a sense of belongingness to supporting teachers, there's definitely one bottom line truth that school climate becomes the foundation, and scale comes with systems. Any closing remarks that you would want other school leaders to know about and how they should approach you?
Um, you know, I uh, I would just say that the important thing is, I believe, is to, really look at the big picture. How
Mm.
do we create environments um, where every child has something special and some place where they feel like they belong? How do we ensure that every child has the background and the experiences that will help them not only to be successful now, but also to have a vision of what success for them can mean in the future. And I think that is what is necessary for all kids in all schools, and that is what's necessary, to address equity, to close achievement
Yeah.
gaps, to serve kids that otherwise struggle. And so that is, I think that is where I have placed my energy, both in my district and then, outside in my book and the things that I do. Um, and so I am excited. I love to get to, talk to people and hear about what they're doing and things like that. And anybody that wants to reach out, they can find me on LinkedIn
Mhm.
at TD Hill, EDD. And that is the best place to get me. And I like to share sometimes some of the things that we have going on in our district.
Perfect. This has been fantastic. Honestly, I've loved to hear you. It has been so warm and so insightful. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Perfect. I'm just